Hey, what's up, guys? Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, integrating our faith into every area of our life, and talk about ways that we as men can give life to others, at home, at work, and in the community. Before we get into today's show, I want to let you know that tickets for RESGEN Men's Summit 2024, which takes place on Saturday, February 3rd, are on sale now at resgen.org. This annual RESGEN event gathers over 1,100 men here in Sioux Falls and thousands more online and at simulcast sites from 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. for a half day of encouragement, laughter, and challenge. This year's speakers include college football analyst David Pollack, executive coach and author Ryan Leake, former Army Ranger and Black Hawk helicopter pilot Jeff Strucker, and North Coast Church pastor Chris Brown. Tickets are only $35 and they will sell out, so I encourage you to get you and your friends registered as soon as you can at resgen.org. All right, joining me for today's episode is a friend of mine named Sam Collier. Sam is a follower of Christ, an author, and the founding pastor of Story Church in Atlanta, Georgia. On today's show, Sam and I spend some time talking about what happens when our story intersects with God's story and the greater story that results. With that in mind, Sam shares several key moments in his story, including his experience of meeting his biological family for the first time in front of a live audience on the Steve Harvey Show. We also talk about some of his favorite leadership tips that he learned from working alongside great leaders like Andy Stanley, and what God recently taught him during a challenging season that resulted in transitioning from leading a church that is known globally to starting a brand new ministry for the Lord. I'm really looking forward to this episode. Here's my conversation with Sam Collier. Sam Collier, man, it is good to have you in Sioux Falls and on the Giving Life Podcast.
Man, it's awesome. I've never been to Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
But I keep saying it's kind of like industrial country, hometown. What do we say? Industrial homey.
Industrial homey is what you call it over here today. So, we're a little bit country, a little bit city, a little bit industrial.
Yeah.
All homey, I guess.
I love it.
Well, dude, this is a long time coming.
Yeah.
Number one, just us being together. Okay, I mean, you and I have been obviously in conversation multiple years because originally you were going to be coming for the RESGEN Men's Summit, and then your mom passed away just prior to that, which you were unable to join us for that.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, in God's perfect timing, He's going to bring you back for us to share some space, to share some time, do a ministry together. And so that time is now. And we did a men's event, a little men's lunch today. That was just great. We'll kind of, revisit some of those topics here at this table. And then now we're able to do this podcast. So thank you. Wow. Thank you for coming to Sioux Falls and hanging out with me.
Well, I got to say this, we did the event today and I get a chance to meet a lot of leaders and hang with a lot of leaders. But it's just easy to be genuine here. And it's easy to pour your life into this because, and again, me and you haven't told me your entire story. We talked a little bit in the car, then we jumped out.
Yeah.
But you can just tell that this ministry was founded on principles that care about people and just want to see people win. It's so easy for organizations and ministries to have missions that help people, but really have other things that they want to do as well, which is not horrible. But this one, you can just tell it's all about the people. And so it's an honor to be here.
Yeah.
It's an honor to talk to you.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to meet you.
Well, this is awesome. So thank you for that encouraging word. What I'd love to do is I just love to start, first of all, just introducing yourself. You got a wife and kids, so I want you to talk about them for a second, introduce the audience to just who your family is, and then what your current role is. And then we're going to dive into what I think is going to be a super meaningful conversation.
Awesome. So my name's Sam Collier. I am the senior pastor and founder of Story Church, Atlanta, and a Greater Story Ministries. I had a podcast that we're bringing back in a new name called The Narrative. Well, we're doing a new podcast, but I had a podcast called A Greater Story, and we did about 98 episodes and interviewed individuals from Andy Stanley to Lecrae to John Chris at the time, to Lisa Turkhurst, and we just jumped around. And man, at one time it was in about 90 million homes on television and other things, and God just blessed it. Then when I planted a church, I just disappeared for a while. And I was like, I'm gone. So now we're getting ready to bring it back with a new show called The Narrative. And we just did Dabo Sweeney and some others. Just trying to be like you, Tom. Just trying to be like you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then you've been married?
Yeah.
How long?
Married 8 years. Okay. Tony Collier.
Yes.
Speaker. She's a speaker, author, all of the above.
Yeah.
And we just had a son. This is Sam Collier Jr. We call him Little Sammy.
Okay.
And before Little Sammy, Dylan has been in the picture. Dylan is my bonus daughter. I inherited her.
Okay.
And she's awesome and amazing. She's around 9 years old. Okay. We're just a ministry family.
Yes.
Doing our best to try to make a difference. Not perfect, but doing our best.
No, yeah. Well, that's so good. I appreciate that, and it's been fun to watch just you be used by the Lord in a variety of different ways over the last several years, and really follow the Lord as He leads you into new adventures and down new avenues, and just be, consistently listening for His voice and saying, "Okay, God, now." We want to be listening, and then we want to be obedient to what you call us to do. And so that's been really fun. And that doesn't mean that those the calls that he calls us to go and do, the things He calls us to do, are always easy. That doesn't mean the road is always smooth. We're going to get into that in a little bit, today as well. But He does always promise to be with us wherever we're going. And I know that's something that you've always counted on, that you've built your life around. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. So I want to start really with just kind of your story. You're able to share your story at the men's lunch that we did here. I mean, right now I know that we're dropping this episode a little bit later in the year.
Yeah,
as we're approaching the holidays. But we did this lunch in the fall in Sioux Falls, and so you kind of shared a good portion of your story. Story Church, for crying out loud. It's called Story Church because, we all have stories, and that God desires that our stories would intersect with His. And then the line that you use, I love, and then look at the greater story that comes from that intersection. So I'd love for you to unpack a little bit of your story for listeners, because there's going to be a lot of people that are listening to this podcast who don't know your story, who don't know Sam Collier. This is going to be an introduction to you and how God has led you, been faithful to you, and has used you, since right away at the early stage of your life, starting with adoption.
Yeah, 100%. I wrote a book recently, about a year to, came out in the pandemic, August 2020, called A Greater Story. And it is about that whole idea of when your story connects to God's story, at least, or a greater story. And that was a tagline for my podcast for such a long time. Then obviously became the book, and now what we did today, the talk, and now the mission of the church, Story Church. Our mission is to help people connect their story to God's story, that it would lead to something greater, and that's because that's been my life. I often say God took a mess and turned it into a miracle. I shared this with you. When my mother was 21, she had me and my twin sister. Then she had 3 kids already. There's 5 kids age 21, welfare, dad addicted to crack cocaine at the time. And she's faced with a decision of whether she gives us up for adoption or raises us in poverty, prays, sends us up the river like Moses in hopes that it would work out. About 2 months later, a couple comes down from Washington, D.C., who had just given their life to Christ and got married and realized they couldn't have kids. Dad's 50 at the time, the one that eventually is going to adopt me and my sister. So he's kind of at the end of his, not the end, but the middle of his second chapter.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So, just even that, 50 years old. Okay. So I'm about to turn 48. Okay. And I got 2.
Are you really?
Yeah. So I turned 48.
You're 25.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Stop it. Keep those compliments coming. They make me feel good. So I'm about to turn 48. I have 2 boys that are 19 and 22.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you told me that I was going to get back in the game and have some, not just 1 baby, but 2 babies, I'd be like
2 months old.
I'd be like, no, you're talking to the wrong guy. But your dad, listen to the voice of the Lord, says, this is you're getting into the game with some babies at 50.
I'm gonna spend the next 20 years raising kids, and they adopt us, and I often share this part of the story that is pretty impactful to some people. In the beginning, they were told not to adopt us because our background was so dark, and so they said that we probably wouldn't be much, crack cocaine addiction, some other thing, poverty, and they adopted us anyway, which is wild because, how many of us have had words spoken over us, and how many of us have surpassed what the world says we're supposed to be based on statistics and are a victim of our background, but God, right? That's that line. That's that church line. That's when you bring out the organ and the piano's like, but God. Right. In the black church, everybody would be running around in this moment, but God. But God, steps in, and He's able to do some incredible things. And so that was our life. They chose us anyway, even when they were being told not to. And God really just, He really just did a miracle. I remember my dad around maybe age 60. So I would have been 10 at the time, or right around 11, or maybe even 9, depending on how old. I think it was like either 51, 52. Racing me up the street at 60. Up the street, running, full speed.
Yeah. Did he beat you?
Yes. I was like, he's running full speed at 60.
Yeah.
So that was it. So long story short, man, my sister gets all A's from kindergarten up to 12th grade, dual scholarship to Spelman, Georgia Tech, becomes an industrial engineer. I start doing music, and by 10th grade, I'm playing 6 instruments, eventually go to ministry school, get my first record deal, all of the above, start a nonprofit, church, and everything I'm doing now. And I end up on the RESGEN podcast, right? And I'm here. So God, I always say he took a mess and turned it into a miracle. So that's the origin of the story.
Yeah. And there's something that just really spoke to me in what you just said, is that even though they were told, hey, these two aren't going to amount to much, they still chose you. And the minute you said that, I just couldn't help but think about the Lord and how He looks at us, right? And it'd be so simple to say, man, look at Sam and Tom. Look at them just trying so hard. Look at just people. Look at humanity.
Yeah.
But yet He chooses us. Even though, we don't have a lot going for us, even though we mess up, even though we screw up, God chooses us. And that word chose, is that we've been chosen. You were chosen. And you think about that choice, how that choice changed the trajectory of your life. That's not an understatement. That is not an understatement. That the choice that your parents made to choose you and your sister completely changed the trajectory. And the choice that Jesus makes in choosing us to be a part of His family through salvation, through death and resurrection, changes the trajectory as we choose Him. Man, that's so.
Somebody needs to hear that even when others don't choose you,
totally,
God has chosen you.
Yeah,
and because He's chosen us, we can live out of freedom and out of that place of being chosen. It's interesting. We talk about the idea of adoption, how so many of us live out of abandonment if we've been adopted, but we also have another choice to live out of being chosen. And I think for me and my story, we've chosen, me and my sister, I've always chosen to live out of the mindset of, we could look at it as we were abandoned, or we could say we were chosen. And because we were chosen, and here's the preaching point, we matter. We can have confidence. We can believe in ourselves because we had 2 individuals that believed in us, and even further, a God who chose us and believes in us. And so,
right.
I won't preach forever.
Oh, I love that. No, I love that. And these 2 individuals, that came from rougher roads themselves.
Yeah.
And then found each other in marriage after some failed marriages before.
Yeah.
Found each other through just the dating process, having conversation about, man, we've kind of tried everything else in life. I didn't want to tell your story, but
say it.
I've heard it, and then I heard you share it today, and it just is such a powerful example of how God takes a mess and turns it into a ministry. Right? And them coming together and saying, hey, we really need to give Jesus a shot, give their lives over to Christ. Their lives are transformed. And then because of that, then they're able to now be ministers to their kids that they chose. And which, okay, again, I never know where these conversations are going to go, but these are things that just start popping in my brain. Like, your parents understood the value of their primary ministry being their kids. Which for parents out there, I mean, there is no more important truth than we can understand as parents, is that we are the primary ministers for our kids. Sunday school teacher, it's not the pastor, the youth pastor, whatever. God wants us to be the primary ministers. Those other people come alongside us and help us, other voices. But man, we are the ones to be pastoring and leading our kids and laying the foundation for Christ as Savior and Lord. That was your folks.
It's Andy Stanley used to say the most important thing that you may do in your life may not be something you do, but someone you raise. And I say that to our church all the time is, you even if you're a stay-at-home mom, right, that matters because that might be the most important thing you do. We can get other people to, I just had a son, right?
Yeah.
We can get other people to go pastor the church. There can be other people to lead the business and to run RESGEN.
Yeah.
But there's only one father of your kids, and it's you. You know what I'm saying? And so I the way I like to say it is, it's our primary ministry. It's the ministry we have first before anything else. It is taking care of our kids.
Yeah, and we're gonna make mistakes. I mean, there's no perfect parent.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna fail our kids in some capacity and all of that. But I heard a statement once that just said, it's far easier to move from failure to success than from excuses to success. And that for us to say, okay, man, I may have failed in this. Let's admit that. Let's apologize. Man, you know what? I missed the mark on that son or daughter or whatever. Forgive me for that. And now let's just try to say, let's learn from that, and so that we can be more successful next time. As opposed to what we're tempted to do, I think, in our humanness, especially as men, is, well, let me give an excuse why.
Yeah.
This is why. This is why. Well, excuses are pretty easy to come up with. But when we can do the work to move from failure to success, it's way easier than just continuing to pile up excuses.
Tom, you seem like the kind of guy that can say sorry to your kids easily. Is that true?
I learned, when you've had as much practice as I have, it's one of those things. But, I learned early on that while I do have, I mean, let's be real. We all have a pride that says no, okay, I'm right, or I did this right, and we don't want to admit failure and all that kind of thing. But, it's one of those things that I feel like I've always tried to do is to be able to come and say, I'm really sorry. The way I responded, the way that I reacted, or I'm late or whatever, that's one of those things that has come a little bit easier to me, just for I don't know, for whatever reason, but it probably is because I just had to get better at doing it, and then trying to put practices in place so that it's not just sorries, it's not just forgive me, because sorries are, they can be really empty if it results in any kind of change, right? Yeah. So that's the hard part, is doing the work and saying, okay, how do we make sure that, why did I respond that way? Or why, what is the reason that I'm late? Or, what is the underlying issue that causes this kind of thing to take place where I have to say I'm sorry? And let's try to get to the root of that, so then that sorry can turn into growth. And we talked a little bit about that today, even just about the commitment to continually growing. See, I had another statement that I heard recently was, it's what you learn after you know it all that makes the difference. And we are all know-it-alls in certain areas.
Excellent.
But it's what we learn after we know it all that really makes a difference. And so when we have that kind of humility to learn from that stuff, but that's a process. That's me learning, Sam, and you kind of flip the script here and ask the question.
Just a little. I used to have a podcast.
Yeah, I know. I'm here straight up professional. That's what I meant.
Well, I met your son today, and I literally thought that. I said, this looks like a kid that's healthy because he's had a proper interaction with his parents, and it's in those interactions where he finds dignity and worth.
Well, but even in that, there was a season where Isaiah and I we were at each other, especially those older teen years and that kind of this fighting for alpha male status,
right,
and that kind of thing. And but the best thing that we were able to do was to be able to meet and to say, hey, here's where I failed. Here's how I'm feeling. And then there was some therapy involved.
Come on.
We talked about
that today.
Talked about the importance of leaning into the work of going and taking the stigma off of the whole counseling, especially as guys. The admitting that we don't have it all together, the admitting that we need to have professionals speak into our life,
yes,
help us look at things from a different view, tell us where we're wrong, how we could do things differently. And so he went and was able to wrestle with some stuff with an individual. I was able to go to wrestle with some stuff with an individual, and now. Yeah, I mean, we have a phenomenal relationship, and I'm so grateful for that. I mean, there's that doesn't mean again that it's perfect, but it's such a healthy, fun, loving relationship. And I was told this tip, and I've said this on the podcast before. So if you're a avid listener, you've heard me say this, but something that really changed my viewpoint of parenting, Sam, was this statement. You'll be parents of adult children far longer than you'll be parents of little children. And when you're in it, like when you're in the parenting of small children stage,
right, or
the parenting of teenagers stage, sometimes you can't see beyond that. I mean, you can't see beyond it because it's just like, I mean, you just feel like every day you're in it, right? But it's remembering, like, having this long-term vision and mentality of like, this is, you got to play the long game. You got to play the long game. My wife always talked about, picking battles. I mean, what are the battles you really want to fight? What are the hills you really want to die on?
Yeah.
One of her aunt and uncles taught me this. They said, Tom, there's behavior issues and there's heart issues. And what we want to do is what you want to do. They were telling me this. What you want to do is always focus more on the heart. Is this a behavioral issue or is it a heart issue? If it's a behavioral issue, then let's make sure that we kind of like work on the behaviors and all this. But if it's a heart issue, then let's really focus more on those, because if it's that's what's out of the heart flows that's the wellspring of life, right? And so how do we guard the heart? How do we protect the heart? How do we just make sure that heart is filled with love? And then the behavioral issues, a lot of times, especially if you can nip it in the bud, a lot of times those will take care of themselves as you are moving forward and as they get there, as they go through phases, seasons. And let's be real, being a kid today, it's hard. I mean, being a parent's hard. There's no question about that. But being a kid today, I mean, I don't know. You're younger than me, by about 10 years.
Well, your son's a hip hop star now.
Yeah. So you, I mean, you're about 10 years younger than me. So, when social media was not around until, was that maybe when you were in college?
No, I mean, MySpace started maybe in high school.
Okay. So
middle high school.
Right. Okay. So like, you think about just that in and of itself, and cell phones, connectivity, all of this. Being a teenager today is far different than when you and I were teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just astronomically high. And I actually listened to a good portion of a message that you recently preached at your church, where you were just talking about the influence of music. And
you listened to that?
Yeah, I did. I listened to that one. I did.
Did you like it?
And so, well, what I loved about it is that as believers and as people that are striving to follow Jesus ourselves, and then lead our families, we have to guard, and we have to be able to speak truth, and not be shy about it, and stand up against the enemy's schemes.
Yes,
and that's the reality, is that and that's a whole difficult line to walk sometimes as parents, as you know, is because it's easy to say, oh, it's just a phase, or it's just this, so we need to let teens be teens, or man, I listened to this, or I did this and I turned out okay. Well, okay, that's true. That may be true. But how do we still guard and protect our kids, not keep them in a bubble, like guide them, and then so that eventually they're able to make those decisions. I love the conversation that you had with your dad when you were 16 years old.
Yeah.
So you're 16 years old, and you sit down with your dad, and your dad says what to you? Because you were kind of like doing some behaviors.
Yes, I was messing up. Okay, this is my testimony. It's in the book, wherever the camera is. This one. Go get the book, A Greater Story. The details are in there. The dark details. He sat me down after I had made some mistakes and said, at this point, we've taught you everything we could teach you. This is age 16. And if you get somebody pregnant, it's on you. If you end up in jail, it's on you. But we're handing the keys of your life back to you. What becomes of your life is now up to you. And that's the night I gave my life to Christ for the first time. And so to your point about leading our kids and all of these things, sometimes, love is everything and you need love, but sometimes tough love is what is needed the most. Me and one of my friends were talking about the sex talk, like when we were growing up.
Yeah.
I was like, what did your dad tell you? And we were going back and forth. And it's interesting. I won't talk about what my dad told me. Okay? we had a few conversations. But he was saying, his dad was older. And because his dad was older, he didn't really say much about it. So because he didn't say much, he was left on his own to figure out how to do it. And I think for all of us, I think about that scripture, train up a child in the way that he should go, and he won't depart. Obviously, and we know that passage in the Old Testament is talking about in introducing the word to our kids, planting seeds in them that when they need it, we may not see it in the moment, but when they need it, it's at least there for them. That's what I think our role is. One of the roles is as parents is to go, you may not think they're listening, but I think back to my friend, he goes, man, I just think it would have been helpful had I just had something to go on. Had he said something to me about this is what sex is. This is how it impacts you. This is what I would recommend. Even if the kid doesn't do what he recommends, at least I have it in my mind to go, I know what's right and wrong. I have exposure. Otherwise, we're left to figure it out on our own.
Right.
And I don't know that figuring it out on our own is always the best teacher. And so anyway, that's my day.
Well, yeah, because the reality is, and we talked about the scripture earlier on today of, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Most of the time it's because a lot of our own understanding will get us in trouble, follow us down the wrong road. And so if you don't have that important teaching on, let's say, a topic like sex with parents, you're going to lean on your own understanding. Well, where are we going to gain that understanding? We're going to gain it from our buddies at school, or from pop culture, or music, TV, movies, whatever. That's our understanding because that's what we're viewing, right?
Yes.
That's where our kids are. They're spending however much time in media every day and with their friends every day. And so especially when our kids are young, and your kids are at that age now where there's a high level of listenership still happening at the age of your kids, but slowly but surely as they become more and more in the teenage realm, if that foundation's not there, it's going to be so much easier for the friends to be the loudest voice in their ear. It usually is anyway, because as they're transitioning to the next season of life, but when there is a strong relationship that happens between parent and child at an early age, and that strong foundation, Deuteronomy chapter 6, where people are, it's like, hey, we've been talking about, you've heard us mention the name of the Lord. We've put it on the door frames. We've just been talking about it as we come and as we go. All of a sudden, then that's what they're like. That's the foundation. That's the foundation of our home, and that's what you were able to be a part of with your sister. And so I want to ask you a question. So fast forward now to your mid-20s, and you've had this relationship, this strong foundation with your parents.
Yes.
And your dad says to you and your sister that you need to find your biological parents. When that was stated to you, and I want you to tell the story because you do it way better than I, because it's your story. But my question in there is, you had seen the care. You have seen how trustworthy that your parents were throughout your life. So a statement like that, which came out of a little bit out of like nowhere.
Yes.
Was it received and thought about in a way that was, well, man, I trust his voice, and so I really need to think about that at a deeper level because of how much I know he loves, cares for me, and how much I trust him?
Mm-hmm. This is a big question, and I never get a chance, often at least, to talk about all of the nuances of that question and of that moment, because it's in the story, we're telling it, we go from one to the next and where that leads us. But what's so interesting is, my dad, he got a lot of things right. He didn't get everything right? Sure. None of us do. None of us do. Right. He got a lot right. And one of the things, he was a crazy man, is a crazy man. Okay. He's 86. Now, and the older you get, I don't care. I'm going to say whatever I want to. And so, crazy man from the countries, I always say, from the country, chickens, cows, rutabagas. If you don't know what a rutabaga is, it's a country vegetable. Mm-hmm. Okay, you only get it if you're from like the deep South. And so he grew up on a farm. I mean, I could go for days on his upbringing. But he was a wild man. He's just straight shooter. And I think for him, he really felt like it was his responsibility to guide us the right way. He wasn't the most eloquent in how he did that. I mean, he was but he was gonna make sure it got done, right? It's like, we're gonna get there. It might be clunky, but we're gonna get there. And so for me, again, I'm 24. So really by this time, he can kind of let me do my own thing.
Yeah, you're an adult.
I'm an adult. Mm-hmm. My sister's an adult, and he's still parenting us. And he's like, hey, you need to go do this. And we're like, what is going on? And somewhere in the lead up to this moment that I don't tell in the story, because it'll be forever, is I think for 2 years before that, he would mention every now and then, I think you need to, at some point you probably need to think through who your parents are. Like, it was just very random, very, there's something in it I think you might need, stuff like that. But it was never, you need to go find your parents.
Yeah.
So I think he got to the point after 2 years of, I've been trying to drop clues. You need to go find your parents.
So let me ask you, did you and your sister, when those little breadcrumbs that he was dropping, like when you heard those little nuggets, like, did you think, yeah, we probably should? Like, did you feel like, oh, we probably do need that in our life? Or was it something that was like, oh, I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can't speak for my sister.
Sure.
What I will say is my hypothesis would be, based on the information that I have, that she was like, no. That's my hypothesis. For me, I probably would describe my disposition as,
yeah,
maybe, sure. I think for both.
I'm free. I got a free Saturday.
I mean, at some point, maybe. If it happens, it happens. That's kind of where I was.
Sure.
And I think both me and my sister, we had such a solid upbringing, Christian upbringing, all of the above, that we didn't have a desire. We had to find our biological family. And it's interesting, I meet a lot of you call them adoptees, those that were adopted.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That share the same story. If you have a childhood in which we call it, the mother hole and the father hole that's not there, or that is there because you've been given up for adoption, it obviously it can't be biologically filled, but there's something unique that happens that allows for that hole to be filled with your parents. And you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's very similar to when we get adopted into the family of God. You know, Jesus is the one that paid it all. We're in because of his sacrifice. So we didn't do a sacrifice. He did a sacrifice. And he paid that penalty. And then by way of proxy, we're in. And it's kind of similar with our families. It's by way of proxy, this mom and dad hole was filled. So you grow up going, I'm okay with the story. At some point, you just get to the point where you go, it becomes a fairy tale, and it's, oh, I was rescued. You know, it's very. This is a horrible way to say this, but it's very similar to someone dying, and you kind of accepting, oh, they've died, they're not coming back, and now I have to live with this new reality. And even though we didn't know if our biological family or parents were even alive. So you just kind of accept this. And so there was no real desire to go, let's go find out who, you know. So when he said it, it was kind of just like, and so he kind of had to make us do it. He's like, no, I think you need to do this. And I was like, okay, you know, sure. Yeah. So.
And the way that it was done was a little bit more unconventional.
100% unconventional. Like I said, we're going to get there. It might be clunky on the way.
So it's a little unconventional. And going on a live broadcast of the Steve Harvey show.
Yeah.
But there was a letter that was sent, and it, like, at first, by your sister to the show. There's a year that goes by where you just thought maybe it got lost in the mail, probably. You didn't even think so she writes a letter based upon, because your dad said, I mean, originally the only reason why Steve Harvey was even in the picture, because he said, and Steve Harvey's going to make it happen.
Yes. So let's jump into this, because this is genuinely my dad. I left this part out of the story. It wasn't all deep, and I don't think his reasoning was super deep. So this all became a thing because he genuinely did not want us to grow up and marry our cousins. I'm being very serious. He's like, you could marry your cousin and you would not know. You could marry a sister. And he's like straight face. This is it. He's like, you could marry your cousin and you wouldn't know it. And I'm like, what? He was like, is that what you want?
Is that what you want?
I'm like, no, I don't want to marry my cousin.
Is that what you want?
It's like, that could happen. And that's his argument. That's his struggle. So you need to go find your parents. And so it started there for him. It was not a very deep reason. It became deep later, like, oh, maybe there's some things. But what was plaguing him was, oh my gosh, they could grow up and marry their family members. And so this is why you need to do this. And so out of that place, he had a barbershop on Auburn. He would watch the Steve Harvey show every day. And he said God told him while he was watching the Steve Harvey show that Steve was going to do this. And he was right.
Yeah.
But we thought he was crazy because I'm like, you're wildin'.
Had you ever heard him say that statement, God told me this, before? Like in your upbringing?
This was the clearest he's said it.
Okay.
He made mention to things like that before, but not that clear. He would say stuff like, I really feel like this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Like, I feel this deeply in my soul or like in my spirit.
Yeah.
I feel like I think this is going to happen.
Right.
I think this person is, I told you were going to be. So like when we would accomplish a goal, a lot of times I would be surprised. I'd be shocked. Like, oh my gosh, I made it in. I got into the school, or I did the album, I got the deal. And he'd be like, I know. I told you were going to do that. He's like, this is what I already knew. Yeah. So he did have this, God told me type thing.
Yeah.
He hears from the Lord.
Yeah.
But this was the clearest.
But when he came in hot with God told me this.
God told me this. I said, you're out of control.
Okay.
I'm leaving.
Okay, so then let's fast forward. Eventually, yes, you do go on the show.
Yes.
And
And they tell us that they did not find our parents.
Okay, so when you arrive, I mean, you at this point are believing that you are literally coming on to just kind of share the story, and that there's some people there that are going to try to help.
Yes.
Okay.
They felt like, so just connecting the dots, he tells us this, my sister writes in, she doesn't think anybody's going to write back. A year later, they call. They say, it's a new job. There's a producer had a new job. And then she says, your story is the top story. We think we can help you find your parents. They fly us up to the show, and they don't tell us until we get to the show that we didn't find anybody, but we want to bring you on to make a plea. We get on the show. And this is a part of again, I don't get to talk about this side of the story often. They were so invested in us believing that they didn't find anybody that they wrote lines for us to rehearse backstage, telling people that we wanted to meet our family. So, and this was one of the ways I think they were selling it to us. So we're literally in the back. They have my parents in one room, and they have me and my sister in another room, which, come to think about it, was probably for a reason. But, and in me and my sister's room, we are rehearsing, and we're saying, they're like, all right, so this is what you would say next. And, do y'all feel good about that? And we're like, hey, if you're out there anywhere, we would love to meet you, or, it'd be da-da-da-da. So we're like, this is the thing.
Yeah.
And so they say, Steve was going to say this, and then we're going to go to commercial break, and then you're going to come back, and then y'all are going to make the plea, and then Steve is going to say this. So we get on the show, Steve says this, we go to commercial break, and we come, and on commercial break, they say, hey, so now is when you're going to make the plea to the world. We come back after commercial break, and Steve says, hey, I know we said we didn't meet your family, but that's not true. Eleanor, come on out. And our biological mother walks out.
Right.
And it begins.
Yeah, tell me the feeling that, and I'm sure it's feelings, that overcame you the first time you laid eyes on your biological mom.
Yeah. I think surreal would be a good word, but from a different angle. I think, so when we had Sammy, my youngest son, I told Tony, I'm probably, for about a year, if not 2 years, I'm probably going to be in shock. So right around year 2, I'm probably going to say, oh, I have a son. And for me, it's just such an unbelievable thing to have a kid. And I'm still there. He's 1 and like 2 months at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm still like, hey, who's this? I'm like picking him up, like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
It still hasn't registered to me that I have a son.
Yeah.
And that's how I think it was for me in that moment with our biological mother. It felt like I was standing outside of my body looking at this moment happen. And you're like, and you're on national television. So that's happening too.
That's weird too. Yeah, yeah.
So you're like, okay, I'm taking this in. I'm also trying to think about what is my face as the camera is watching. And so by the time she sits down, and I've explained this to you, I kind of just put my head down, and people can watch the clip if they type in Sam Collier, Steve Harvey on Google.
Yeah.
They can pull it up, or type in A Greater Story. You get the book, watch the thing, all the stuff. I put my head down because it's like emotions are flooding me like crazy. I'm on TV. What am I looking like? What does the public want me to do? Should I respond like this? Is this my biological mother? Wait, what's going on? Should I be happy? Should I be sad? Should I be angry? And I just freeze, honestly. I just freeze. My sister, I think, is more in the moment because she's crying. And I'm just trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And I honestly just have to press pause. I say this I said this to you. I said this today, that there were so many emotions. I just, God told me, let's press pause on this and let's circle back after the show.
Yeah.
Because right now we need to be in this moment.
Because when you do that, because then you can really begin to deal with because again, and that's something that you have to lean into, because a lot of times I think that when things can happen, obviously a very dramatic situation like that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
And, but there's different dramatic situations that happen in all our lives at varying levels, right? But whether some people would say it's great, whether some people would say it's small, it's still your dramatic thing.
Yeah.
And so it's for us not to minimize that, but to say, okay, I'm feeling this, and to lean into that and then say, okay, so let's really deal, as opposed to just suppressing and stuffing. Because I think that's somewhat easy for us to do. Because I want to get into, we're going to get into another emotion in a little bit that I want to talk with you about a little bit later. But because the problem is when we try to stuff our emotions and say that we don't want to deal with that, we don't want to feel that, we don't want to, whatever kinds of things we have that are really, we're fearful.
Yeah.
We're fearful of what will happen if we face those. But for you to listen to the Lord say, hey, first of all those feelings are warranted. They're okay. They're okay. They're normal, but let's kind of put a pin in those and then come back.
Yeah.
Let's just kind of try to be in this moment. And I'm here with you too. Like you. So
that's it.
So
I'm here with you.
Yeah. So let me ask you, did you feel God's presence with you at that time?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think the moment we got off the plane, and from Atlanta to Chicago, and then stayed in the hotel, and then rode in the limo to the show, on the show, after the show, back home, even back to me walking through the airport to get home. I felt him with me the whole way. And just knowing this is God's plan, this is what he wants to do. He's got me. And I would tell you something that's interesting. So after the show, we meet our mother, our brothers and sisters. We can come back to that. And a therapist sits me and my sister Sarah, backstage, sits us down before our biological family comes in the room, because they gave us a therapist to kind of process this. Remember, it's this white guy, don't know his name, kind of wacky guy. And he looks at me and my sister and he says, just remember this. Whatever you came in here with is what you're going to leave with. Ooh, so powerful. And what he was saying was, you came in accepted. You came in chosen.
Yes.
You came in a son and a daughter of God. You're going to leave, no matter what happens today, and no matter what has happened today, that's not going to change. And I think, is God with me? I know that was God going, this is just an addition to the story. This isn't the story.
That speaks to the word identity so much, brother. I'm telling, that, seriously, that's the first, man, that is identity. That is when our identity is understood as an adopted daughter and son into the family of God. Because let's be real, we're all adopted.
Come on.
We're all adopted to the family of God, right? So when our identity is as an adopted son or daughter of the Most High King and of the Lord, that is our identity, regardless of what we walk into, what we walk through, the challenges, the successes, the victories, the mountaintops, the valleys. All of that. And that dude was strategically placed, that wacky white dude.
The wacky white counselor. The wacky white middle age.
Probably roughly almost 48, probably. Yeah.
His name was Tom.
That's too much. Okay, but he was placed by the Lord.
Yeah.
I just really, and that was a word, I think, that spoke to you that day, and I think that's a word that speaks to us today. Because I think about listeners, viewers right now that are in dramatic situations, that are in tough situations, that marriages are hard. Their job is a struggle right now. Parenting, there's challenges there. And you think about, okay, so man, how do we process? How do we deal with all of those? Well, we have to lean in. God, what are you saying? Help me find my identity in you, even in these difficult times, even in these challenges. Help me hear your voice, and help me continue to be faithful and understanding that you are with me as I walk through the waters. The water's not going to, go over me. When I walk through the flames, I won't be burned, for you, the Lord, my Savior. And as we read in Isaiah, and like that whole identity thing that's where I'm stuck on it right now, Sam. I'm just stuck on that right now because of that word that you heard.
I just had to pause and give God praise, man. He's with us, and we can be rooted because of what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, that in that moment, I think we have to pause and just talk to every adopted kid out there, and every kid that is experiencing foster care, because and every parent that is adopting or has adopted, or who's fostering. I want to say to the kids, or like me, who were adopted, you can choose to live out of abandonment or out of being chosen. The reality is you've been chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody can take that away. No matter what the backside of the story is, what you came in here with is what you're going to leave with. You are chosen. You might have been sent up the river, but you've been chosen. And you can choose to live out of that place, or you can live out of this other one. But what I will tell you is, living out of this other one does not take you where God wants you to be. I think about us being saved and making the decision to live out of that salvation place. And many times as a pastor, we have to spend time helping people understand, no, this is your identity.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about God rewriting our stories, and we think about individuals who go from being meth addicts to being Christ followers and having a new life, being in prison and then giving their life to Christ, and all of a sudden being radically changed, having failed marriages, and then my parents' story, the first two didn't work, but this one,
mm-hmm.
I think in order to embrace the new life that we find in Christ, we have to choose to live out of a different place. Mm-hmm. Because for many of us, we could keep living out of I did math, so that means I'm going to live out of that place. And what Christ says is, no, you're a new, amen,
mm-hmm.
You're a new creation.
Yep, thank you, Lord.
And I think that's the same message for my brothers and sisters who have been adopted. You're a new creation. You're not the one that was abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that's been accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for so many of us, fostering and parenting those that may not have come from us biologically, I think it's our job to instill that into our kids. Is to say, you're not that, you're this. You're not that, you're this. And I think our parents, in some weird way, did a really good job of doing that. I remember my dad saying to me around age 4 and 5, you're adopted. He was like,
have a good day at school.
He was like, you're adopted. We were like, we are? He said, yes, we chose you. Did you know that?
Mm.
We were like, really? Yep. And we were like, well, what happened? Well, we think your mother couldn't take care of you, or your parent, or there was poverty, but we don't know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do know is we're here, and we chose you. You're adopted. And we were like, we're adopted. And we went to school, and we told everybody, we're adopted. And all the other kids that were adopted were like, so are we. And then the kids that weren't adopted, when their parents came to pick them up, they said, can we be adopted? Can we be adopted? They said, it doesn't work like that. He rewrote the story for us. Mm. And I think that was one of the reasons we were able to live out of that place, because he pushed it. My dad was, again, 86, but very aggressive about not letting us live out of the wrong place. Mm-hmm. No, we believe in you. You're strong. You're beautiful. You're confident. You're chosen.
Yeah.
And that's who you are. You're not abandoned. You're chosen. So,
oh, yeah.
Bring the organ out.
Oh, that's a good. So I want to ask you, like, so post show, there was after you met your mom, your siblings come out, and you got to meet your siblings, that you did not know you had, right? You did.
Yes, did not know.
Did not know.
We didn't know we had brothers and sisters until like a month before.
Okay, so
we never even knew.
So I mean, more shock, more awe that's happening, all that kind of thing. So now post show.
Caveat: brothers and sisters from the same mother and father.
Yes.
All right,
okay. Got it. Perfect. No, thank you for that clarification. So post show happens. Like credits start to roll, or I mean, whatever, right? New segment comes on, whatever. So then what? Like, what happens after the show? It's like, hey, well, this has been good.
Like, I'm trying to figure out how much of the story I want to share. I will say, we all hung out that night.
Yeah.
And they got us reservations at this really nice Mexican restaurant. It was like a fancy one. It was, the ones that have, Wagyu steak.
Okay. Yeah.
At a Mexican. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This might be a Mexican spot. It's really a 5-star restaurant.
Yeah.
That happens to serve Mexican.
Steve Harvey said, hey, Taco Bell's in the back. Right? I don't think there would have been a problem with that.
They're like, Steve.
Yeah.
This is a reunion.
Yeah. We know what you make.
Let's celebrate.
Yeah.
You just played Earth, Wind, and Fire. Let's go. And he did. Commercial break. He's like, by the way, Steve Harvey is everything you think he would be.
Yeah.
And more in person. He's like on steroids in person. You're like, he's wild. He's a wild man. And so we all go out to eat. You're dying.
Well, because I'm just picturing, because everybody's got so many shows, right? Now I'm thinking Family Feud and all this, and like literally, he is the same person no matter what shows he's on. I mean, he's authentically him. And I know that he like literally goes to bed at like midnight every night.
Yeah.
Like starts recording shows at 6. I mean, I don't know when the guy sleeps, but he's got energy for days.
Well, he's doing the show and he's like, thank you guys so much. We're going to go to commercial break. Goes to commercial. He's like, turn on the Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, it's crazy. He's dancing. And they're like, all right, Steve, we're back. He's like, and we're back. So that's literally it. I said, this man is a professional. This man. Okay, so what were we talking about? Okay, after the show.
We're going to dinner.
We go to dinner.
Sorry, I derailed us with... Sorry, that's my fault. That's a bad host. Okay.
So... We're going... No, we need... And don't edit this part out.
Well, that's the beauty. We don't edit much. I think out of those 70 episodes, we probably edit out like 4 minutes. Then it's like 70 episodes. So, okay. Get it. What do you got?
So we go to a Mexican restaurant. And it's so funny. I remember this. We talk about what started after the show was a true example of nature versus nurture. That's what happened. So, because that's the question, right? It's like which one wins and how does it and what matters. And here's what I'll say.
Interesting.
Nature will always be there. There are things in your biological family that you just have, and then there are things that have been nurtured, which is why I think adoption is so important, because nurture determines the direction most times, if you can live out of the right place. But we had a lot of examples of that. And after the show, I remember we're at the Mexican restaurant. Somebody makes a joke, everybody laughs. You've heard my laugh. We all have the same laugh. It's like and we're all looking at each other like,
see something else funny. Let's do that again.
I'm like, how do you have that laugh? And same laugh. So that was the nature part. I think the nurture part came in and when we started talking about how we view the world, and what we see over here versus what we see over here, and how we live here versus this, and so on and so forth. And it's not necessarily negative. It's just different, and that was really interesting. And that, I think, has been the journey, is because we have stayed in contact, and I talk to my biological brother the most, like at least every month, if not every other week or like every 2 weeks. If something happens, we're hitting each other. Oh, I saw this. Oh, congratulations. We obviously all follow each other on social media. We're commenting on stuff and sending DMs, and there's a text. And sometimes my brother will call. We do voice notes, me and my brother.
Yeah.
Him and I have been the easiest to like really boom, 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 boom. I think my other sisters, because you got my twin sister and then you got my other 2 sisters that are older. They just do their own thing, so there's nothing there. There's nothing bad there. It's just, and then mom has been that was always, I think, the struggle for me, and I'll just be vulnerable. I think the struggle for me was always not wanting to put people in the wrong place in my heart and in my soul. It's like, and that was something the therapist had to give me permission to do. Like, hey, your mom is your mom. You don't have to move her out of the way to make space for your biological mom.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was going to be a question that I had, is just like, did you have a wrestling match within you about like you almost felt like, okay, if I fully embrace my biological mom, is that hurting my, the mom that has raised me, that is no doubt the deepest of loves. Wrestling with those feelings, and how did that wrestling match go?
Yeah. Without saying too much, I think it's my therapist gave me permission to do what I was naturally feeling, which was, I'll say this way. Here's what she said. She said, hey, you don't have to replace categories. You can just add new ones. And that was huge for me, because I didn't want to replace I didn't want to replace the mom category or the dad category. I'm like, no, I need mom there. As I said, when we were getting ready to get together, I eulogized her. I preached her funeral.
Yeah.
And that was mom, and that's the category I wanted her to be right there, because she earned that category. I love another statement. You don't have to give someone something that they didn't earn, which was mom raised me. So she earned the mom space. Dad raised me. He earned the dad space. But there was a challenge for me of going, but I also feel like I do at least need to create space for where do I put this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I felt like it needed to go somewhere. And she said, you can just create new categories. So there's the mom and dad category, and then there was the biological family category, which you'd be surprised to discover you can do. Yeah. It's like, man, God made us in such a pliable way. We can create spaces for new things, and boundaries were really important as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it makes me think a little bit about how, when you have a child, and where all of a sudden you're like, man, I didn't know that I could love another person in this way. There's a love that you have with Tony, so it's, man, I didn't know I could have a love so deep with another person like I do my wife.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you had a child, adopted, biological, and you're like, wow, I actually have more love within me. I have a greater capacity to love than I thought I did. And then it's like, well, man, now we bring in another kid. We're like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Could I really have more love to give? Oh my gosh, I do. And it's like God just continues to, who's the giver of all good gifts, right? Just gives us more to pour out into others. I love the aspect of the, hey, just add another category. God will give you what you need. That doesn't mean, again, that we're not going to wrestle with certain emotions. There's certain things. We don't have time to go into all this today. Man, I wish we had more time, brother. But the reality is that, there's certain times where I've forgiven everything that my dad, did, but that doesn't mean that there aren't moments that can creep in with like, oh man, I feel some anger rising up within me, or I feel some unforgiveness that wants to attach itself to me. And so that doesn't mean that those emotions don't come. It's just that now we say, okay, no, I'm going to give those over to the Lord, and I'm going to ask the Lord to minister to me through the power of His Holy Spirit, and then replace those with gratitude for where He's brought me and brought us, and fill me with love so that I can continue to pour out the same love and grace that I so willingly receive from the Lord into the situations that I'm struggling with right now. And so I think about, like, just because, that doesn't mean there are times where you're going to have to talk with your therapist, man, I'm still kind of wrestling with this anger or this thing or this whatever. But it's just God meets us there. Again, God, it keeps coming back, I think, to this whole God with us thing. Like, I mean, we're coming up on Christmas, Emmanuel. Like, we sing the song, right? We sing the song. It's in so much God has great hymns and all this. But then we forget that Emmanuel is not just a Christmas song that we sing. It's like a reality each and every day. We just need to recognize that presence and then call upon him throughout the day as we need special doses of things at certain situations.
What I love about the term Emmanuel is we often use that term around Christmas, and Christmas is obviously the time where we celebrate the birth of Jesus, but it has a dual meaning, which is powerful. When we say God is with us, it's celebrating a few things. One, it's teaching us that God is with us every day, all of that, the things that we embrace now. But what's so powerful about it is that it is also introducing to us the coming of the Savior in the earth. So he's born. This is why we sing Emmanuel during this Christmas season, because it's like, oh my God, God is actually with us. He's here. He's walking among us. And that walking among us becomes a foreshadow of what our lives will be, right? He's with us physically in the now, but it's also a foreshadow of what he's going to always be, and that's walking next to us every single day because of his death, burial, and resurrection. And so that Emmanuel, you got me with that.
Yeah, well, that's what the word abide is all about. Like, abide in me. It's being with. It's a continual being with, a continual connection that we have with Christ because of his initial coming, and death, resurrection, giving of the Holy Spirit. That is just such good stuff. Okay, so seriously, my friend, this is, man. Okay, I already teased this, so I got to at least ask this one question. There was so much else that I wanted to talk about, but
it's my fault. It's my fault.
No, absolutely not. This has been so good, and maybe we'll just have to do a part. We'll just do a part 2. That's what we'll do, a part 2. You'll do it from Atlanta at home. We'll just do it over Zoom, and we'll make it good.
But is the mic quality going to be the same?
Well, for sure. I mean, the banter's not. I mean, the banter, when we're sitting this close to each other at the corner of the table, it just takes it up a next level. You know what?
Yes.
Yeah. But so I talked about another emotion that I just wanted to speak with you about before we end our time here. And you mentioned this just a few minutes ago. Originally, you were going to come to the Men's Summit. 9 days prior to that, your mom passed away.
Yeah.
You obviously stayed home, family. You eulogized her, and she was no doubt a very important person in your life. I gave the message at my stepfather's funeral years ago, and I know the difficulty of that, leading that, the grieving process that was a part of him passing away. I'm just wondering about that emotion for you, knowing, the depth of love that your mom had for you, that you had for her, the appreciation that you had for the gift that she gave in choosing you, that God gave you in choosing her for you, standing up and at her funeral, and just God giving you the strength that you needed for that moment. And then I know the continual presence that he gave you, post that event as well. So the grieving process for you, men don't like to grieve.
Right.
We avoid it. We stuff it a lot. What was that process like for you? And just what does that still look like?
Wow. I think my life has been a series of ups and downs, a lot of events, but honestly, I think represented well from an emotional perspective what happened to me at the Steve Harvey show. And it was, I need you to press pause on that. We're going to deal with this later. And here's what I need you to do. So I tend to emote, and because I tend to emote and work through my emotions over time. With God, I don't stuff them ever. I just, by the grace of God, have developed the ability, I don't know if it's a gift or it's just something I've developed, to compartmentalize in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Whereas, hey, I know we're going to have to deal with this. We have to deal with it right now. Let's execute and do what we need to do now. And then let's walk this out over time, which is why therapy, I think, for me has been such a big help, because it's a concentrated hour or 2 hours or 3 days, right? Where you are spending intentional time on, hey, let's unpack these emotions. Let's dive through these things. And so for me, during my mom's moment, I had a lot going on. I was not perfect. I couldn't compartmentalize everything in that moment. I broke down on as soon as I got up to speak, which was crazy. I was like, so I just want to, yeah. I mean, it was like, my sister was rolling her eyes. What's going on? And she was rolling her eyes for a couple of reasons, but one was, that was a difficult time, I think, for me and my sister. It's still been a little difficult, just because we responded differently to our biological family. I share openly that I think if she could do it all over again, she probably wouldn't. You know what I mean? Because it wakes up so much, and I don't fault her necessarily for that. And so it makes it difficult when you're trying to navigate that in the family, and your biological, not your biological family, but also your adoptive family. Your family is like, you got to use all these words now. You know what I mean? So I had to do a lot of compartmentalization in order to execute really well. But the name of the eulogy was, how do you bury a dreamer? And what I discovered in that is, we talk about Dr. King all the time. Right? I have a dream. He was a dreamer.
Well, and she passed away right near, Martin Luther King Day.
I believe it was in the month of February, wasn't it? Or was it late month?
Well, it would have been early. Because the men's summer was the last week of January that year.
So it was,
and it was right at, because.
Oh yes, actually,
because you had done weren't you you were a part of leading the Martin Luther King service, right?
I forgot about this. She passed away. I did the funeral, and the next day I had to preside.
I just remembered that being really I remember how close proximity it was, but I just remember that when he spoke.
It was the next day.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of compartmentalization.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't think it was an accident that we're celebrating a dreamer that changed our world through civil rights, through his dream, and I'm burying the dreamer of my family because she taught us how to dream. And I talked about just the idea of her seeing us for what we could be versus what we saw in the moment, or versus what anyone else saw. As a man thinketh, so is he. Because of her dream, here we are. And so it was, it was emotional, and it was sobering, and it was an inspiration, I think, to me, to do the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love what you said about just okay, push pause, but then we're going to take some time to deal with that, to dive into that. And again, a lot of times we want quick fixes. We want to be in and out, one and done. We want to just cruise on through the process.
Yeah.
But dealing with just emotions, hurt, grief, pain, just processing. One thing we don't really do a lot of really well is push pause and reflect.
Yeah.
So it takes time, and be okay with that.
Takes time.
It takes time. Be patient in the process.
Yeah.
You think about, I mean, we're so grateful, at least I am, for God's patience with me. And I'm assuming, Sam, that you're thankful for God's patience with you. You know,
I just prayed for mercy yesterday.
So, I mean, please. And so be patient with yourself. As you know, dudes, as you go through tough stuff, be patient with yourself. Be patient, you know, as you're walking through things with your wife, be patient with your wife. As you walk through things with your kids, be patient with your kids. The same patience that we want to receive, sometimes we're so not good at giving it out to ourselves and to others. And I know that that's one thing that I'm continually working on in my life, Sam, is just that patience in the process, trusting God's timing, and that healing takes time. It just takes time. The other day, I mean, it's a little bit better now. The other day, I was reorganizing some stuff in the garage, and I ended up just knocking a pike down right on my head. You know, cut my head open, and so I was like bleeding out the head. I come walking in.
You can't even tell.
Yeah, and this is there's no makeup. I didn't call for makeup before this or anything.
It's just your hair. That's all.
The receding hairline continues to go further back every year, but the point is that like I had to speak the following day, and I'm like, man, great. Well, maybe it'll be better tomorrow. It wasn't better tomorrow. Scab, and it didn't look good with it. But healing. The point is that healing takes time, and that is physically, that's emotionally, and that's okay. And
yeah,
that whole the processing, the inviting someone else in to help us with the processing and the healing and the listening and the offering other points of view and insight, so crucial and so good. And so I'm so glad that you share openly about that you mentioned that at the men's lunch today, and then you immediately brought that up today, because it's such a healthy thing that for guys to just talk. We say at the very least, for sure, if it's not with a counselor or pastor right now, that every guy has what we call a band of brothers, 3 to 4 men, that they meet together with, that they pray together with, that they walk and journey through life together with, that can be sounding boards, listening ears, conversationalists with, and just really call you out on your BS when that needs to happen, and help you live in the light, be as close to Jesus as you can, as an engaged dad, lover of your wife, all of those kinds of things. And so if you don't have that, you'll seek that out.
Yeah,
we need those relationships in our lives that we can walk with. So, well, Sam, this has been so good, my friend. I'm so grateful for you being here, for this time that we've been able to share at this table. We usually end the podcast with something we call the final word.
Yeah,
and this is something that we do. The reason why we started doing this from episode 1. And the reason is just because, it's sometimes the final words of people that we just continue to remember. The final word that my grandfather said to me before he passed on, I still remember that. And there's something special about final words. Now, I will tell you this: the vast majority of the words that we've shared, at least that you've shared, have been important and really, really good. I waste words. I probably threw a lot in that weren't necessary today. But
no, it was great.
But you, I loved our conversation. But I'd love for you to just, whatever the Lord lays on your heart right now, 30, 60 seconds, a final word for listeners and viewers today that will kind of put a bow on this episode together.
I think this is coming out around the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that this episode talked a lot about doing the work. And it's something I'm doing right now heavily, and I know you are, and we all are. You talked about having the strong circle of men around us. I would leave us with one word, and it's do the work. Let's do the work. We talk about the idea that when your story connects to God's story, it leads to a greater story. It takes work to connect our story to God's story. Because of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, because he arrived on the earth, right? Celebrate during Christmas, we can do the work and connect our story to his story. Because there was once a time when it was a lot of work.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And we still couldn't fully be connected.
Yeah.
Now we have the opportunity to, and because we have that opportunity, I want to encourage us all, as I encourage myself, to continue to do the work. I want to give a story.
Yeah.
As we talk about therapy and all of the above. Because we've been encouraging men to do it, but I don't know that we fully talked about it in a practical way.
Yeah.
And I want to tell a story that I think will help. My mom had Alzheimer's. And so she was dying for about 3 years. So one of the reasons I think I was able to emote enough but not totally lose it is because I had been mourning her for 2 or 3 years. But for the first year, I didn't even know what was going on. And my sister kept trying to tell me, but I don't know what happened with the communication. I just didn't get it. She was just like, mom needs. I'm like, mom needs, I just saw mom. And one day I went and I saw her and I realized, I said, oh my gosh, things are, she's different. She's changing. I think before she passed, she had pretty much become 7 years old. She couldn't talk, I think she knew who I was, but she, So I checked myself in the on-site for 3 days during the pandemic. So I couldn't go. So I had to do it on Zoom. This is before I started pastoring, and I love on-site. I'm still doing I'm going to go, I'll be back again. I'm excited. And so we're on the call and they do something in on-site. And this is what I want to encourage all of us to do, doing our work, called psychodrama. All right. We use a psychological term. We're getting deep. Psychodrama is a form of trauma treatment that takes objects, turns them into people. And in that, you interact with these objects, and there's a healing that happens on a traumatic level and on a neurological level that begins to correct the trauma. And it brings some stuff out. So we're going back and talking about my mom and some other things, and she makes me, the therapist, the deodorant. Okay. We're just going here. I'm just going to tell the story. I'm the deodorant. So this is the deodorant. She says, so this is you. I'm like, all right. She's like, so you go here. I'm like, great. And then she says, who do you want your mom to be? I'm like, oh, the chair. So my mom's the chair over there. So she makes me write down mom, and I put it on the chair. And she says, all right, now stand behind you. And what do you want to say to mom? Right. So I'm like, oh, I love you. All these other things. Because with me and mom, we worked through some things just same as your. So then she says, now I need you to go on the other side of the chair and become mom. So I go on the other side. She says, what does mom want to say to Sam? And I just break down.
Yeah. No kidding.
And I start screaming, she's gone. I'm in a hotel room. She hasn't passed away. It's about a year or so before she passes away. And I'm screaming, she's gone, she's gone, she's gone. And the therapist is saying, it's okay. Like she's on Zoom in the corner going, it's okay. I'm screaming, she's gone at the deodorant.
Yeah.
But it was the first time in my life that I was able to accept it and start mourning it. My point is, this is the power of the work. We have things in us that if we're going to be healthy and if we're going to be everything God's called us to be, if we're going to be the husbands we want to be, if we're going to be the sons of God that we want to be, we can't skip the work. And for men, it's so difficult for us to do it. But I wanted to give you a real life example of what the work actually is so that we won't be afraid of it. Some of you need to be on the other side of the chair screaming, she's gone. Or on the other side saying back to little Sam, I love you, you're enough. Mm. And that's where I want to end.
Yeah.
That's been my journey. Mm. And it's a journey that I'll continue to do, because the work helps us connect our story to God's story, and it leads to a greater story.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that Jesus is with us every step of that journey. We don't journey.
He's with us in the hotel room.
Yeah. Amen. Brother, thank you. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for your partnership in ministry. And I'm grateful for this time.
Yeah.
And this has been special. So thank you.
Love you, man.
Love too. Thanks for listening in on my conversation with Sam Collier. If you enjoyed the episode and found it helpful, I encourage you to share with others that may enjoy it as well. If you'd like to connect more with Sam, you can do so at samcollier.tv. Also, if you're open to it, I would really appreciate it if you would just take 30 seconds to rate and/or review the podcast. Not only would this be a tremendous gift to me, but it would also be a really easy way for you to help us continue to grow both our audience and our impact. Lastly, don't forget to head to resgen.org to check out all the information about RESGEN Men's Summit 2024, which is coming up on Saturday, February 3rd. All right, that's all for today. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.